Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Friday, May 17th, 2024. It's the end of the day and the end of the week, and you know that means our very happy and very popular Intelligence Community Roundtable with Ray McGovern and Larry Johnson. Ray, let me start with you. How significant is the over-the-top red carpet that President Xi rolled out for President Putin when he visited Beijing yesterday? And what do you think Tony Blinken is worried about with the now very public alliance that the two of them have formed?
Well, the fly in the ointment, Judge, is that I'm not sure Tony Blinken understands that the correlation of forces has really changed. Yeah, I'm serious. It's really incredible how these people live in their own world. And when you see the tectonic shift that has happened just in the last 3 years since Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan told Biden to tell Putin, look, we understand your problem. You got a long border with a hostile China. We know that they're squeezing you. We understand that. We know that you're really at a disadvantage there. Soto voce. So we're going to take advantage of that. Nothing could be farther from the truth. And the way this thing plays out now, they not only don't understand what's going on in Ukraine, but they don't understand how ready China is to help Russia in this endeavor, given the fact that in the final analysis, China is still enemy number one. They can read it in Pentagon documents, for God's sake. So they have a lot of skin in this game to make sure that Russia doesn't lose.
What kind of aid, military aid, Larry, is China providing to Russia to use in the war against Ukraine?
Actually, I think very little. I think it's really the opposite. Russia's in a position to provide China with access to advanced hypersonic missiles that China would use to fend off a U.S. attack, because the U.S. attack will be maritime. Russia really doesn't need anything from China. That's been I call it the lie ginned up by Blinken and others in a bid to try to discredit and smear China. But Russia and China have actually, they've been cooperating for quite a while on military endeavors. For example, they started 4 years ago doing joint military exercises with Iran. So this is not brand new. The relationship and growing closer has been underway for quite a while. What's accelerated it is the overt threats being made across the board by politicians in Washington talking about going to war with China. The number 2 guy at the Pacific PACOM, the Indian Ocean Pacific Command that used to be called traditionally PACOM out in Hawaii, is talking about, hey, we're going to be at war with China by 2025. The Chinese aren't stupid, and they actually can speak and understand English. We may have trouble with Chinese, but they understand the English. And you're not going to sit there in Beijing and listen to these kinds of threats from the United States and think, oh, those Americans, they're just funning. They don't mean it. Absolutely not. You take it dead serious. And by virtue of that, they recognize we're going to align ourselves with Russia, and because Russia's looking at the same thing. They're saying the West is crazy. They're hell-bent on attacking us. Let's stand together, because together we're stronger than all of them.
Is this, Ray, a recognition? Professor Mearsheimer thinks it is. Is this a recognition that American hegemony, American imperialism is kaput?
Well, the point is here, Judge, who recognizes that? You do, and Larry does, and I do. Does Blinken? Does Biden? Now, he's getting really bad advice. Okay, a year and a half ago, the director of national intelligence, Avril Haines, told him, I was asked about Russia-Chinese relations. They have meetings. Sometimes they have meetings. And we're watching very carefully to see if China is giving Russia any military aid, and they're not. That was a year and a half ago. Now, of course, somebody's got to be to blame for what's happening in Ukraine, and the Chinese are not standing for it. Their spokesperson, their foreign minister, said, "Look, we're not going to be a scapegoat here just because you guys are listening. Just because you guys are losing. We're not going to be a scapegoat, and we're not providing anything out of the ordinary." And that happens to be true, as Larry has just said.
Larry, there has to be, maybe I'm wrong, some smart people in the Defense Department, non-ideological, some non-ideological smart people in the State Department, some non-ideological smart people in the intelligence community who understand American hegemony is kaput, and this alliance between Russia and China is serious. Don't they? Well, are there people who recognize this? Or is everybody telling Joe Biden what they think he wants to hear?
I don't think there's anybody that's in a decision-making position that's saying that. I sat in on a webinar yesterday that involved a CIA analyst who was analyst on Iran, who'd been there for 34 years. I wish I could have recorded it and showed it around because that highlights what the problem with the agency is. This guy was so pedestrian, so off base with his analysis but he's representative. It's called sort of the best of the desperate have been hanging around because they necessarily couldn't get a job out in the private sector, so they've hung in there. But it was appalling to watch, and so I suspect you've got that throughout. You don't have anybody that's sitting down that they're going to listen to that's going to say, "Hey, folks, we've spent our last 50 years of foreign policy trying to keep Russia and China together, and they're together now. And together, they're a pretty potent marriage. And so therefore, they create some new dynamics that we're not capable of stopping." And, but there's not that realization. Nobody likes having to admit, when you think you're 6'4" and handsome and admit that you're short and ugly. That's the problem.
Thanks a lot, Larry.
Is excluded since none of the three of us is 6'4" and none of the three of us is short and ugly. But that's funny. But let's move. Meaning, if Prime Minister Netanyahu successfully provokes Iran into a serious war, and if the United States comes to Israel's aid in a serious war, would Russia and China come to Iran's aid? Ray?
Russia and Iran are on the verge of having a mutual defense treaty, or something they don't call a mutual defense treaty, but a strategic document like Russia has with China.
Right.
Now, whether that means that the Russians would jump in if Iran got into a dust-up with Israel, that's another question. But they have immense political support for Iran. So does China. And of course, China depends very much on oil from Iran, and they want to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. So, yeah, they would be interested. They would use all their influence. I don't think they'd need to jump in because Iran these days, and that's new, is quite capable of defending itself without any resort to the nuclear weapons that they don't yet have, but may get now, given the change in thinking back in Tehran.
Larry, are the Lindsey Grahams and John Boltons and Victoria Nulands incapable of recognizing that the era of American exceptionalism and hegemony is over?
Yeah, short answer, yes. And again, this was illustrated in that webinar I sat in on yesterday, because the whole issue of this last exchange of attacks between Israel and Iran, and these people, again, this 34-year veteran of the CIA, they're going, "Oh yeah, Iran really suffered a blow. Oh, Israel really showed them." And I'm looking around going, "What planet are you guys on?" Because Israel didn't touch Iran. And so, but there is this perception among these people that Israel's dominating, Iran is losing, that we've got the military power. All we have to do is wave our finger and voila, the Iranians are going to cower, go running for the mountains, and we can defeat them. And none of these people step back and look in the mirror and say, how did we do in Afghanistan over the last 20 years?
Right.
How have we done in Iraq?
Were there other members, either present or former, like the two of you, of the intelligence community on this webinar?
Yeah.
Or was this open to the public? Was it a PR stunt, or were these serious conversations?
No, this was hosted by one of these hedge funds, who's trying to bring money in and bring cutting edge analysis. And one of the guys was also had been a senior with Voice of America, and so I mean the propaganda on it was just appalling, because part of what none of them even dealt with the issue of what does the growing influence of Iran and China mean with respect, of Russia and China mean with respect to Iran's position in the Middle East, which I would say, hey, it's significant. Because going back to the question you initially asked, Ray, Iran's got the military capability to take care of itself, but the mere fact that it has been conducting these annual military exercises means that if it gets into a spot that it can handle, yes, Russia and China will come to their aid. We're in that kind of world now.
So if America is crazy enough to try and wage war against mainland China, purportedly in behalf of Taiwan, does Russia come to China's aid, or does China not need Russia? Ray?
Russia will do some saber rattling and more in the West if China is put under that kind of threat. It's not going to happen, though, Judge, because as much as the Navy beats its breast and says we're going to match the Chinese Navy now, they really can't. And just look at the map, for God's sake. Taiwan is going to be reunited peacefully, not anytime soon, but the Chinese are, they're patient. They're going to just wait it out. And unless the U.S. stirs up trouble, then there's not going to be any fighting out there, despite what naval commanders are saying. But if there is, the two, China and Russia, are so joined at the hip now that Russia would provide Chinese with whatever help they needed. And when push comes to shove, they're going to need much help. Just look at the map and look at the Chinese Navy and look at the other armaments that China has built up over the last decade or so.
Earlier this week, Secretary Blinken made a surprise trip to Kyiv. We're going to play a clip now, a very stylized, highly produced, almost Hollywood looking. There's about three different cameras in this shot clip of Tony Blinken addressing President Zelensky and what appears to be his cabinet or his senior leaders. Cut number 14, Chris.
The assistance is now on the way. Some of it's already arrived. More of it will be arriving. And that's going to make a real difference against the ongoing Russian aggression on the battlefield. And we're determined, along with many other partners for Ukraine, to make sure that you succeed on the battlefield. We're equally determined that over time, Ukraine stands strongly on its own feet, militarily, economically, democratically. A strong, successful, thriving, free Ukraine is the best possible rebuke to Putin and the best possible guarantor for your future. And for all of that, the United States is and will remain a committed partner.
Is it me, or does it look like that was a Hollywood production and they rehearsed it?
Oh yeah, no. When you go to that, you can go from the front shot of Blinken to the two shot. The one over his shoulder looking at Zelensky, and then you get the panning shot with the guy walking behind with the camera. This means a video editor had to sit down and put all that together, and the quality of it tells you how good their video editors is. They sort of suck because you could see some of the other cameras in the shot, but still to go to that length to produce that, I mean, this is all about PR and spin, and they're ignoring the reality that without trained manpower, Ukraine's toast. and they're not going to get trained manpower. So, it's the end is inevitable.
All right, Ray, I want you to respond to this. I won't even introduce it. You'll know who it is and where he is and what he's trying to do the minute this comes on. Cut number 16.
The United States is with you. So much of the world is with you. And they're fighting, not just for a free Ukraine, but for the free world. And the free world is with you too. So maybe we can try something?
Yeah, sure.
I don't forget.
This is the present day. This is the present day successor to Thomas Jefferson. Go ahead, Ray.
Judge, both in reaction to that and in reaction to the other clip, I just want to cry out, no fair, no fair. Leading the Ukrainian people down the primrose path, giving them the idea that they can prevail, that's no fair. That's just really kind of contemptuous. Now, the reality, as Larry said, is that the trajectory is in favor of Russia. Russia is going to win this one. The only question is whether it'll be a definitive win before the election in November, or whether these guys, Blinken and Sullivan and the others, will say, well, wait till 2025. We're going to really prevail then and convince enough people so that they can defeat Trump in November. It's really insidious because the Ukrainians have all used up 500,000 young men, for God's sake, the flower of their youth. Now they're recruiting more people. They don't have enough to get the kind of usage out of the money and the weapons that we are belatedly providing to them. So, yeah, it's just sad to watch. This happened before. We like to do this. We don't like to do this, but we do this to Afghans and Iraqis and Vietnamese. We do this regularly. When we can't win, we go as long as we can politically, and then we go home.
So, Larry, what the hell was accomplished by this secret mission where he popped up having breakfast with Zelensky on Tuesday or Wednesday morning of this week?
Yeah, I think he was there more to take the temperature, to figure out how long could Zelensky survive. Because there'd been, a coup attempt the week before with those two colonels. They blamed it on Russia. That wasn't Russia. That's internal to Ukraine. The carping, the complaints that used to be coming only from outside, from Russian sources, are now coming from Ukrainian sources, particularly enraged by seeing all the dragon's teeth, those concrete, they look like concrete pyramids. Those are called dragon's teeth. Those have been stacked up instead of deployed. And they found out that all the money that had been spent to build the defenses had been absconded with by a variety of scoundrels in Ukraine. And so there are actually Ukrainian media outlets that are under the control of Zelensky that are now expressing genuine outrage over it. You've got the troops calling General Syrski names that even sailors would blush at using. So it's not going in the right direction for him. And so here's Blinken in there trying to put he's trying to put lipstick on the pig, and pig's not looking too good.
Before we jump over to Netanyahu's problems, here's Blinken eating pizza in a pizza parlor. Now, you would think this is rather benign, and he's with his opposite number. The gentleman on the right in the top photo is the Minister of Defense for Ukraine. In the bottom are two neo-Nazis in the same pizza parlor in front of the same table. And behind them on the wall is all the neo-Nazi paraphernalia that was removed from the wall so that the State Department photographers could take a picture of their boss, Tony Blinken, in front of something other than a swastika. What does this tell you, if anything, Ray?
Well, it says PR on steroids. It reminds me of when Colin Powell gave his infamous speech before the UN Security Council on February 5th,
So that's the one about the weapons of mass destruction.
Right. What they did was they took down the great big mural of Guernica. Okay. They took down that mural because it was an anti-war kind of a peace sort of thing, and they took it away so that no one would see the inconsistency with what Powell was saying and what that painting showed. So it's all PR, and the PR is only going to be only as good as the Russians decide that they'll put up with. Putin has said many times that he realizes that U.S. foreign and military policy is primarily domestic creature, and that nothing happens before elections that's good. And so will he wait until after November to finish their job in Ukraine? I suggest he will, but not if they send more trainers in, not if they create more provocations. If Estonia and Lithuania force NATO's hand and send trainers into Ukraine, well, 2 months ago, the head of the SVR, Narishkin, had said, well, they become targets, then they won't come back alive.
Of course. Larry, transitioning, has Prime Minister Netanyahu painted himself into a corner with respect to the parents or the loved ones of the hostages, the right-wingers in his cabinet, demanding an immediate invasion and leveling of Rafah, him knowing he can't stay in office much longer unless he continues the war. He boasted to Haaretz earlier this week the war could go on for another 10 years. Stated differently, how unstable is his government and how unstable is Israel as we speak?
He's tied to the fire hydrant, and the dog is facing him. I mean, that's he's in an impossible situation. What's really I had a chance to listen to one of Ben Gavir's acolytes the other day.
You must have had a lot of patience, Larry.
Well, he was debating Norman Finkelstein, and so here's what this guy said, and he was dead serious. This land is ours. This land, from the river to the sea, it's our historical land. It's our heritage. And so in his mind, there was no possibility that, just because his relatives had lived in Eastern Europe for 300 years, didn't lessen his claim upon this land where these Palestinians have been living for the past 1,000 years. Oh, no. It's theirs. And so there's no way to reason with that kind of mentality. That kind of mentality is so locked in, it's blind to everything else. And basically, if we take his logic, and many Native American Indian tribes would agree with this, all people of European descent, clear out, including all the slaves from Africa that were brought from Africa, clear out. It's all going back to the Sioux, the Comanche, the Cochise, all the American native tribes, they get the land back. That's what Netanyahu's facing, and so he's playing to that audience because they're the majority now. They're the ones who actually wield the most power in Israel. It's not the ones who used to argue for a middle ground of living and coexisting with Palestinians. They want to destroy it.
I'm going to guess, Larry, that Professor Finkelstein demolished Ben Gavir. He's
always stays remarkably calm and tried to deal with the guy with facts. But with someone like that, facts don't mean anything. Yeah, that's the problem.
Professor Finkelstein, if you're listening, we welcome you on this show anytime. I would love to be able to interview you, and you'd have a large international audience that would appreciate your work. How adept, Ray, is the Israeli lobby at suppressing free speech in the United States? Seems pretty good at it to me.
Well, so far, so good from their point of view. I don't think these students are going to give up. So it's a matter of how much they persist and how much support they get from outside. What I'd like to just say is that what we've talked about before with respect to Netanyahu, he has a personal stake in this. One of his predecessors, Olmert, said just last week that Netanyahu's personal needs are not congruent with any change in policy. As for Israel's biblical right to this land, I had a personal encounter with a rabbi on top of one of these settlements, okay, in the West Bank. We were driving up on the road that only Israelis allowed to drive in, and we saw this destitute village at the bottom. No running water, no nothing. Okay, we get up to the top, and there's sprinklers sprinkling the nice grass. And this rabbi in charge of the settlement from Cleveland, and he welcomes us. And one of my friends says, "Now, how do you explain the situation down there and the situation up here?" And he says, "Oh, he says, God granted us this land. Deuteronomy 15:4, you shall have this land." Now, I don't know much about the Old Testament, but I did know Deuteronomy 15:4. And I said, "Rabbi, read the rest of Deuteronomy 15:4. He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You only gave us the first half." The Bible's right there. So he said, "All right, you shall have this land with milk and honey, so long as there are no poor among you." Whoa! So it's a deal. You might call that a covenant, Rabbi. How do you explain those people down at the bottom of the hill? Well, we had to leave early because we were no longer welcome, asking impertinent questions of rabbis from Cleveland, now reigning in the settler community.
Larry, have you ever seen a situation in which Ray was no longer welcome?
Hey, listen. I always knew that Ray was a secret Talmudic scholar. Okay,
An Irish Catholic from New York, and he's a secret Talmudic scholar. We're going to call it a day in a week, guys. Thank you very, very much for your time, as always. The viewers love you. I love you. We'll see you at your usual times on Friday. On Monday. Have a great week.
Great. Thanks, Judge.
Thank you. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.